Namo MyoHoRengeKyo. Hello everyone. Hello again. I hope this video, sorry as I mess with the mic here. Hopefully that wasn't too noisy. Sorry. Start again. Hello everyone. Namo MyoHoRengeKyo. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for supporting this resource of videos, the website, the bookstore, the mandala store. Namo MyoHoRengeKyo. Your practice is everything. And patrons, either through Patreon or PayPal or purchasing books from the bookstore or the new ebooks page on threefoldlotus.com. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, let us continue with a letter from Teradamari as it relates to the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment of life. Some people criticize me, saying Nichiren does not understand the capacities of the people of the time, but goes around preaching in a harsh manner. That is why he meets with difficulties. I'm sorry. It makes me laugh because I've heard similar criticisms. Nobody likes to be corrected, me included. But it's important to remember that if somebody's going to point out something, you might need to reflect on it. If only, as in some cases, I've had to reflect on my own karma, my own habit energies, yeah. And I've had to make adjustments because the criticisms were valid. Whether they were expressed validly or not, that's just somebody's perspective. But what they were pointing to was something that I recognized, yeah, I could do that better. In many other cases, as is unfortunately the case as a human being, some people will criticize you just out of their being defensive or feeling whatever. Who knows? It's such a waste of time to try to figure out how others are thinking. Worry about how you're thinking, right? And if somebody's making a criticism, take a pause, reflect on it, and see if it has any validity. And if it doesn't, move on, right? There's no point in engaging with that. If they point out something that you had noticed, you might even want to thank them. Thank you for pointing that out. I'm doing several things. I'm working on it, and I think I'll ameliorate in the future. Right? It's the nature of polishing ourselves. Other people may say, continuing with Nichiren here, quote, the practices described in the encouraging devotion chapter or the encouraging resolve chapter are for bodhisattvas who are far advanced in practice. Nichiren ought to follow the practices of the peaceful practices chapter, yet he fails to do so. So now they're going to tell Bodhisattva Nichiren, you should be more selective about which parts of Shakyamuni's teachings you practice and you follow. When did... Isn't that a ridiculous thing to say? Only somebody who feels challenged about the way they've gone on in whatever discipline, doesn't have to be Buddhism, would say, you should only do things partially correctly. You come on a little too strong about being correct about correctness. Allow a little fallacy into what you do, and then, we'll be your friends. It's just twisted thinking. And we see it in our modern society now, so it's nothing new, right? And it's nothing, I guess what I mean is, it's nothing that we've evolved away from. If anything, we've seemed to, as a species, having more deeply committed to differentiation and picking apart things so that we can claim superiority for whatever little slice of reality that we control or own. Human behavior is somewhat baffling in that regard. Okay, Nichiren goes on. Others say, quote, I too know the Lotus Sutra is supreme, the MyoHoRengeKyo, but I say nothing about it. And you're proud of that? End quote. Still others complain that I give all my attention to doctrinal teachings. Well, what the hell else is there? If you claim to be a Buddhist, and you're practicing Buddhism, you say you're practicing Buddhism, and you're not following the teachings of Shakyamuni, what the hell are you doing then? Why are you calling yourself a Buddhist? You know, I don't get it. Yeah, I'm a race car mechanic. That's what I call myself, a race car mechanic. Oh, you work on race cars? No. I know what race cars are, but I choose to build doll houses for my nieces and for people. That's what I do. Then why do you call yourself a race car mechanic? Oh, because I am. What's wrong? What's wrong with you? Right? Unbelievable. You're teaching the correct teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha, how to practice Buddhism, but you follow the teachings too much. Wow. Okay. Nichiren says, I'm well aware of these criticisms against me, but I recall the case of Pinho, who had his legs cut off at the knee, and of Kiyomaru, pure man, who was dubbed Kigaremaru, filthy man, and almost put to death. All the people of the time laughed at them with scorn, but unlike those two men, those who laughed left no good name behind them, and all the people who level unjust criticisms at me will meet with a similar fate. So does that sound arrogant? Nichiren is simply saying these people with their unfounded criticisms, what will they eventually amount to with that kind of mindset? Not that because they blame me, Nichiren, they're going to hell. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying with the mindset that they're using, kind of in a compassionate way, Nichiren's saying they're leading their lives into the ground. How are they going to amount to anything if that's the way they justify their behavior? You see, this is why I say Buddhism, not a religion, it's a way of understanding how life works. For the betterment of yourself, and obviously, as you do so, influence your environs. And this is all Buddhism has ever said. The encouraging resolution or resolve chapter says, quote, there will be many ignorant people who will curse and speak ill of us, end quote. There it is in the doctrinal studies. There it is, Shakyamuni's own words. Yeah? I observe my own situation in this passage. Why should it not apply to all of you as well? You and I. Right? This is a universal thought. It's not special about Buddhism. It's about phenomena. It's about the engine of life. It's about the nature of all phenomena. It's a truth, period. They will attack us with swords and staves. The passage continues, I have experienced this passage from the sutra with my own body, as we well know, yeah? Why do you, my disciples, not do likewise? Oh, obviously, there's some disciples. Remember, this letter is written not to it's sent to a specific individual, but it's meant to be shared amongst the Sangha. And obviously, there are those in the Sangha who say, it's tough for me to follow your teachings, Nichiren, because my neighbors don't like me anymore. My boss looks at me with one eye squinted. Whatever. Ego. We're worried about how we look, how we appear. Isn't it best to be correct, to be right? Sometimes you have to have wisdom. Go, I'm right, but now is not a good time to make a huge point of it. But at the same time, the converse of that is don't overreact when people are reacting to you. Understand with compassion, they're ignorant. They just don't understand yet. Further on, the passage says, quote, in the midst of the great assembly, they constantly try to defame us, end quote. And, quote, they will address the rulers, high ministers, Brahmins, and householders, slandering and speaking ill of us, end quote. In other words, they'll spread rumors because that's how they feel a sense of power. Well, we got to take that guy down. He makes us look bad. She makes us look stupid. It's petty. It's so childish. But adults do it all the time, yeah? And they will confront us with foul language and angry frowns. Angry again and again, we will be banished. Again and again means time after time. And I, Nichiren, have been repeatedly driven away and have twice been condemned to exile, which amounts to go and die. The Lotus Sutra accords with the fashion of the preachings employed by all Buddhas of the three existences. In other words, this is a consistent thing. This wasn't just true when Shakyamuni was preaching. Teaching, I prefer. Preaching. The truths that Shakyamuni was exploring and exemplifying in his expedient means and in the Lotus Sutra, the MyoHoRengeKyo, they're universal truths. They're not specific to a time or place. His teaching method and the ways he taught people was sensitive to time and place, cultures, realities of his day and his surroundings. But what he was teaching, far beyond that, right? Bodhisattvas of the earth, like you and I, much removed, 3,000 years after his passing. Well, 2,700, however you calculate it, approximately 3,000 years. Long enough. All these things are exactly true. We can see them mirrored in our daily lives. So they're not provisional. The Lotus Sutra is about us, about the truth, which he taught back then after he tried to elevate the people of his time, elevate their, if elevation, we have this up-down thing in language, but developed their minds. The past events described in the Never Disparaging chapter, I am now experiencing as predicted in the Encouraging Resolve chapter. Thus, the present foretold in the Encouraging Resolve chapter corresponds to the past of the Never Disparaging chapter. The Encouraging Resolve chapter, Confidence chapter of the present, will be the Never Disparaging chapter of the future. And at that time, I, Nichiren, will be its Bodhisattva never disparaging. And there he is saying it very directly, that what he's enacting in his life, his mission, is that of a bodhisattva. He's being, as he's asked us to do before, our exemplar. He's saying, emulate me. Practice this way. Practice MyoHoRengeKyo. That is the foundation of truth. But as you practice MyoHoRengeKyo, just don't do it just as a happy habit so you can color in little portions of your life. Make this the foundation of your life, the way you present yourself to the universe, with dignity, in combination and integrated with the engine of life. That kind of commitment, that kind of conviction, confidence, resolve. This is life at its full. The MyoHoRengeKyo consists of a single work in 8 volumes and 28 chapters, but I have heard that the sutra as it existed in India was long enough to stretch over a whole Yohana. In other words, there must have been many more chapters to it. Now, I've talked about this before. Kumarajiva, the great scholar, the great Indian scholar that he was privy to many, many, many teachings of that last 8 years of Shakyamuni's life. All of those sermons extant in translations of the day captured the last 8 years of his teaching life. Some were obviously straight translations of Shakyamuni's words. Remember, memorization, repetition, right? It was all verbal transmission. And then some patrons, in order to secure Buddhism for the future, in order to make that cause with the wealth that they had, would hire scribes to work with somebody who had memorized that sermon and translate it or transcribe it, into various languages. Their own, maybe some others, and we read about that in the Gandhara excavations, right, in northeastern India, which is now several different countries. So we know that Kumarajiva was working with a great many teachings, sermons of that time period. And to his credit, he was able to see that some of the things that had surfaced, they were individual interpretations of those sermons. Maybe they were dragging older teachings into the teachings of that time. And they just didn't fit with the great, the great corpus of teachings of those final 8 years of Shakyamuni's life. Some stood out. Yeah, these resonate with one another. This makes sense here. This is a development of that. Yeah. And he started to put these teachings in order. He didn't say, I'm going to make 28 chapters, right? In fact, some of the earlier assemblages that he made only had 27. And of those 27, some were different than those included in the last 28, right? Some he'd received from other schools who claimed to be Lotus teachings, but really, upon greater examination, obviously were of earlier teachings that somebody pushed into current use. I mean, this has happened so many times. We've talked about it so many times. It's like, yeah. That's what people do. I like this old stuff. I want it in the new stuff. But it's not the new stuff. But I want to include it because I like it. Why wouldn't that happen amongst scholars in Buddhism? That's why someone like Kumarajiva is upheld as such a great scholar, because he had the wisdom to look at this compendium of teachings and think, these things don't belong here. It's obvious what goes together. And eventually, in his whittling down and then reinvestigating and then expanding and then whittling down, he arrived at what he felt confident was the Lotus teachings. And that became the Lotus Sutra, the teachings of the wonderful law, the MyoHoRengeKyo. Knowing that's what the Lotus teachings are about, when the chapter comes from Timbuktu that says, chant wagga wagga boo boo, that doesn't fit. That's not the Daimoka. That's not the consistent teaching of this wonderful Lotus law. That's something else. Get out of here. Right? So he edited and came up with these final 28 chapters as encompassing the Lotus teachings. Now, there were some other teachings that reference that group of teachings, and he didn't include them in the Lotus Sutra. The 3 chapters of the Innumerable Meanings Sutra are 3 chapters that belong to the era of the Lotus teachings, but they weren't within the corpus of the Lotus Sutra. They were in the corpus of the teachings. They were leading into. So he made that an ovation, what's the word? The introduction sutra to this corpus of teachings, yeah? And it kind of wraps up in the never disparaging, or the meditations on the Bodhisattva, has different names depending on the translation. So we have an opening and a closing sutra bracketing this set of sutra, this set of Lotus wonderful law teachings, right? I lost my place. The 28-chapter version used today in China and Japan represents the most essential portion of an abbreviated version. That's what he means. He's saying of Kumarajiva's authorship and scholarly developments and encompassing of the last 8 years of Shakyamuni's teachings. There are a great many teachings, some of which are erroneous, some of which are part of his teachings, but this 28 chapters is the essential path, the essential arc of those 8 teachings, 8 years of teachings of the ultimate law. Let us set aside for now the revelation section of the sutra. In the following transmission section, the 3 pronouncements of the treasure tower, right, chapter, are delivered to the assembly gathered at Eagle Peak, Vulture Peak, whatever, Great Bird Peak, and present at the ceremony in the air. Right? That's what this mandala represents behind me, right? As to the vow made in the encouraging dedication or encouraging confidence chapter, resolve, by the 20,000, 80,000, and 800,000 million nayutas of great bodhisattvas, a man of shallow wisdom like myself cannot comprehend it. So this is Nichiren being humble. But what he's indicating is, as a man, these concepts elucidated in the ceremony in the sky, the MyoHoRengeKyo teachings, it's beyond comprehension. We've discussed this before. The examples, the expedient means in Buddhism tries to push the limits of our understanding because we're so... Why? Why does Shakyamuni do that? It's simple. We are creatures of attachment. And if we can quantify something, we feel we know it better. But the extent to the engine of life, the karmic freight train that we each are a momentum of, you have to reach beyond that samsaric understanding of life. It's not quantifiable. It's an experiential thing. And as an experience, you can't put limits on it because then you will never reach it. Or if you do reach it, you'll be lazy and you won't continue it. It's the nature of... Look at the universe. Do we know where the edge is? Of course not. We know it's growing. We estimate its speed of growth all the time. We keep trying to quantify this universe. When did it start? When will it end? Hey, wait a minute. While you're all preoccupied with looking at a beginning and end or trying to find it, why aren't you just living it? Why don't you take a moment to see how unfathomable it is? The largesse of your life right now, right now, right now. Isn't that more exciting? More amazing? More awe-inspiring? Stay here. Be. A man of shallow wisdom like myself cannot comprehend it. He's not saying he's shallow. He's admitting to the fallacy of being a human being with a sentient mind of samsara, like you and I. But the phrase, quote, in an age of fear and evil, end quote, that appears in this chapter, nevertheless indicates the beginning of the latter day of the law. The following Peaceful Practices chapter refers to this age of fear and evil, with the words in the latter age. And looking at other translations of the sutra, we find that the Lotus Sutra of the correct law, it appears as in the latter age hereafter. There are little subtle differences in different translations and versions of the MyoHoRengeKyo, saying the same thing. Or in the latter age to come. While in the supplemented Lotus Sutra of the Wonderful Law, it appears as, quote, in an age of fear and evil, end quote. Once again, Nichiren is flexing his scholarship here. By the way, there are several versions of the Lotus Sutra. We have settled on the most scholarly grouping and, the word fails me, of the scholarship of Kumarajiva. But he didn't annihilate and burn every other copy. He demonstrated these 28 chapters and the opening and closing chapters as the wholly representative, wholly with a W, representative teachings of the last 8 years of Shakyamuni's life. But for reference, he still has all of those other documents so that you could reinvestigate and judge for yourself. And over thousands of years, the scholars have agreed. And Nichiren obviously has reviewed all of this, so he knows. In the latter age, which corresponds to our own time, the three types of enemies have appeared, but not a single one of the 800,000 million Nayutas of Bodhisattvas is anywhere to be seen. It is like a lake that has dried and is missing its full share of water, or a waning moon that is far from full. If the water is clear, it will reflect the moon's image, and if trees are planted, then birds can nest in them. Therefore I, Nichiren, propagate this sutra in place of the 800,000 million Nayutas of Bodhisattvas. I ask that those Bodhisattvas grant me their aid and protection. He's relying on the teachings of Shakyamuni. So this is the authority he's representing. He's not saying, me, Nichiren, a fisherman's son, am right. I am correct and only I. No, he's standing on the scholarship of thousands of years of study of Shakyamuni's teachings. He said, those are right. Those are true and correct. You can attack me all you want, but you won't change the truth that I'm showing you. I didn't invent it. I'm just pointing at the emperor's naked. You can fight me all you want, but he's dangling in the public right now. What are you going to do? It's an interesting position to put himself in. It's the kind of resolve you and I need to have about our practice. Right? When we get confronted by people, we shouldn't take it personally. It's not about our person. right? Follow the law, not the person. That includes yourself. When people assail you, they're trying to debase you into this fleshy human thing and vilify it. But this fleshy human thing isn't enlightenment. Enlightenment is experienced in the sentient mind. And no matter what you do to my body, my sentient mind is intact until there's no body to support it. So go ahead, vilify me. You're hurting yourself. You're making causes against enlightenment, and you don't even know it or understand it. I don't feel hurt for me. I feel hurt for you. Compassion. I ask that those bodhisattvas grant me their aid and protection. In other words, I rely on the scholarship of the past to bolster my confidence and resolve in the correct practice of my awakening, of influencing others, of experiencing with totality the amazing, unfathomable aspect of instantiations of potential happening constantly, moment to moment to moment. Namo MyoHoRengeKyo. The lay priest who bears this letter tells me that you instructed him to accompany me to the province of Sado on my way to my exile. But in view of the expenses of the trip and other difficulties, I'm sending him back to you with this teaching. I already know the depths of your consideration, right? I'm not spitting on your offer to be accompanied by this gentleman. Thank you profoundly. But my work, the work of propagation of Buddhism, is much better served, once again, not just me, Nichiren the man, but this Bodhisattva mission, which can be transmitted through this aid that you sent to me, is a precious opportunity to bring back these words of encouragement and guidance to the Sangha. Much more important than just following my frail body to a Sado island. And maybe incurring health hazards and so forth on this man that you sent. Do you see the profound consideration and compassion of this man? Please explain to the others what I've written here. I'm very much concerned about the monks who are in prison. And they're only in prison because they declared their allegiance to me, or my teachings anyway. And I hope you will inform me of their situation at your earliest convenience. Respectfully, Nichiren. How does that relate to the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment? Well, doesn't it all? I hope it's become obvious to you by now that all of these writings of Nichiren, of the MyoHoRengeKyo, the Lotus Sutra, as Nichiren points out, just in the lifespan chapter alone, this is the fundamental understanding of life that underpins the MyoHoRengeKyo. The understanding that in each moment, one after another, we are reinventing our life experience and therefore the experience of all life every moment. We have a trajectory, our energies, and they're all of life. What we focus on, what we develop, is an appreciation for the totality without being distracted and dragged into those aspects that can be unaffirming, unsupportive, that represent an experience of negativity in any form. Yeah, they're there. That's the nature of the duality of the universe itself. There's positive and negative. There is and isn't. This is just yin and yang. And nobody would tell you that focusing on the yin is more important than focusing on the yang, because either one begets the other. The question is, how do you experience it all? What is your attitude and intent about it all? Do you pick out those things that are ugly and say, that's where I'm going, and then you take your all of it and you just sink it into that funnel of yuck? Do you understand that that's a choice you're making? Wouldn't it be better to say, well, that yuck is kind of beautiful in a way, but I'm focusing on this bright lights and colors and rainbows and wonderfulness and challenges that enable me to find out more about my potential? Or do challenges just crush you? Because everything I've done now is meaningless. Wah. That's being stuck in the past, isn't it? Isn't it? Moment to moment. New moment, new moment, new life, new life, new life. How amazing is that? It's a shift in the mind, choosing to experience life in its very creative moment, its creation, its instantiation, its manifestation. What words can we wrap around this understanding that we're moving, that life is happening, that our sentient minds allows us to participate in that happening? Namo MyoHoRengeKyo. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. We start a new Go show in the next one. I think that's enough for today. I so appreciate your practice, your dedication. Stay strong. Savor your practice, every moment of it, just like you want to savor your life. There is nothing more amazing than your life right now. Namo MyoHoRengeKyo. Like, subscribe, support, buy books, buy the ebooks. Just practice. That's what this is about. I'll see you in the next one. Okay? Bye for now.